relief I don't take advantage because it just makes my job easier.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever, happy time zone, whatever it is, wherever you might be. Man, it's been a morning.
Whatever you're doing.
Yeah, whatever it is that you're doing, I hope you enjoy it. Good Lord, it's been a so this morning I refinanced my house and today was closing. So I did that at 8, but my wife needed to be here and she was taking the kids to school. So I sat there awkwardly with an attorney for half an hour in our kitchen waiting for her to get home. So we get all the paperwork, right? And we start slamming in all this paperwork, and I had to go present to a conference at 9 a.m. And it's 8:30, and we're just starting the paperwork. I'm like, oh my God, there's no way to make this. So we finish at 8:58. Right? So I'm like, shit, all right, I got 90 seconds. Nice. I'm going to run downstairs. So I ran downstairs, turned on my machine, and Teams is like, yeah, JK, not today, pal. So I had to join this presentation. I got people text me, hey, are you going to join? I'm like, yeah, I'm trying to join, but Teams won't let me join, you know. And then finally we get started. We get going. And then I was like, wait a minute, the stream's at 10 o'clock. Sure enough, that's why we're 25 minutes late today. Because then, of course, we tried to do Teams here, and we can't because it's Teams. And so now we so we finally made it, Christos. How are you this morning, my friend?
After your amazing monologue, I am good. I mean, I don't have anything to complain, but I will be getting up at 5:30 tomorrow to deliver a very similar session at the same conference. So fun times. I also see that you had a cracking session there. People don't realize that you were up later than everybody else. So everyone's like, oh man, 6 a.m. and JP kicked it a higher gear. The session was so funny. Obviously, if you've ever been to any of JP session, you know that he's always funny. But it was not 6 a.m., so that's not the same challenge.
Hey, you know what? It adds to the mystique. Don't tell them. If they think that I could be that excitable at 6 a.m., then the thing that's funny about that too is everybody in the meeting is for Europe, which is why they're at 6 a.m. Pacific time, because everybody in the meeting's in Europe. So if they think that, and I mean, I could say I was on the East Coast, and they'd be like, well, we live in Europe, so we don't know what that means, and it wouldn't matter anyway. So just, you know what? If they think that I am good at doing things at 6 a.m. and don't know that it was 9 a.m. for me, that's totally fine too.
Fine. I won't tell them. It's gonna be our little secret. By the way,
no, Bolt. I'm not throwing Teams under the bus. I am. No, what's happening is Teams is the bus, and I am getting plowed into it routinely twice a week because it's just, I don't know. It's just I don't know what the problem is, but like every time I join a meeting, it says, hey, you're joining the meeting, and I click join, and then I don't see anything, but I hear people, so I start talking, and then Teams says, hey, we ran into a problem. And it boots me out of the meeting. And so everybody thinks, you know, I don't know. I'm not saying anybody. No, I'm not saying anybody's stupid. I'm just saying that East Coast, like East Coast of what? It could be anything, right? So I'm just like, you know,
that's true.
Certainly
East Coast of the
certainly
UK.
That's right. I don't.
It could be Edinburgh.
It could be where?
Edinburgh.
Because my buddy used to live in Edinburgh. So I used to call it that.
Now you're just winding everyone. We're gonna lose half of our European audience if you keep on down that road.
Well, so I used to call it Edinburgh just to see what he would do, and I'm pretty sure that he was plotting my murder at least 2 or 3 times. So, anyway, and then AZ Wildfire.
We have a special guest.
Huh?
We have a special guest.
We do have a very special guest who has extremely creative social media names, which I'm super excited about.
So we have Simon Krabs, who is a developer. A very exciting background, by the way, and super interesting. Like we were talking just before we started the show, and man, his background is fantastic. We're also making fun of the UK mess with Excel spreadsheets. I think we're allowed to judge remotely as people judge the US remotely about the whole situation. So there you go, taking turns. And He worked for the NHS prior to that. Now he's working at
As an Excel consultant?
It's
as
Beeline
a
software. Beeline software.
Feedline. So yes,
That's
he's
right.
working right now that's a Microsoft Gold partner, and he's building some really amazing things, including Xamarin and Azure stuff. And I bumped onto him on Twitter at some point where she's like, I built this amazing app. And I was like, yeah, you should come on the show and show us, and then we can stick some Azure AD in there. These days, I
Yeah.
like to stick Azure AD wherever I can. So if it fits, I'll do it. Right? So, hey, Simon, thanks for joining us. It's afternoon for you, I think.
That's right. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. Yeah, we kind of bump into each other on Twitter. And basically what happened was, and I'll tell you the quick story about how this all came to be, is that I'm known in my company for the person that really embraces Microsoft technology, like the latest stuff. And I get really excited about things like Azure Functions and durable entities and Microsoft Graph. I literally walked into work one day and said, oh my goodness, have you even seen the Microsoft Graph? This is incredible. I've just discovered this. And half my team were like, what? And the other team were like, oh, I've done it. It's fine. So I'm like the excitable person in the office that's bringing all the new stuff in. But
every office needs one of these people.
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. I think it's the fact that I'm relatively new as well. So I graduated about 16 years ago in computer science, where C# was barely alive, where it was only just coming into being. And I didn't love all the whenever you code in C is great, but when it's a first language, it's quite hard. So now that I'm coming into this in the last 3 years, and C# and Microsoft, there's some amazing stuff being built. So why wouldn't I use advantage of that? So it all came to being when one of my colleagues said, look, we're going to do this pre-sales demo for a client of ours, and we've got Microsoft Dynamics on one end, we're creating like a content management system on the other end, but right in the middle, this company does a lot of voting for grants. So they give away money to charitable causes and things like that, but they take a vote on it. So they've got to work out how they should discuss it and vote anonymously, for example, and things like that. And so one of my colleagues said, look, we've got about a week or so, but can I grab just 3 days of your time? And I said, look, talk to my PM. I'm sure we'll be able to sort that out. That sounds good. So when he described what it would be a real-time voting app where they should log in and ideally see their calendar entries of upcoming meetings. I think, okay, SignalR, I think Microsoft Graph. And they said, ideally, it's a place where they could collaborate, so maybe Microsoft Teams. And I said, well, a Teams app really is, you can build it in different ways, but one of the ways that I've found is it's just a website underneath. So why don't we start with a website, and if we have time, we make it into a Teams app. But when you've got 3 days to build something, you kind of cut corners as much as possible and just get it over the line. And
no pressure, right? 3 days, plenty of time. What can go wrong?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, it turns out like I had about 5 days to work with, but I had my own work. So the first day I spent like 2 hours on it. The next day I spent 45 minutes on it, and because the rest of the day was client meetings. And then the next day I said, look, I've got to like dedicate the next 2.5 days to this, otherwise we won't make anything at all. So I'm pretty excited to show you what I've made. As the story goes, well, I'll show you all of what it does and how we get there. But when I made this, a couple of hours on the first day, a couple of hours on the second day, and then the day before the presentation, I worked from 9 a.m. through to 1 a.m. in the morning, just to get it over the line, just before the actual presentation. And I got to say this now and get this out of the way, is that 11 p.m. when my colleague was still online, because we're working together because he did the Dynamics CRM side of it, he said, you do realize the left-hand side menu doesn't work? And I said, yeah, I know, because we're going to demo it to the client, right? We're not going to click the next link. We're going to get away with it. And he went, no, we're going to give it to the clients, and they're going to play with it for an hour. I'm like, you're joking. I've finished. You're joking me. So if we go through the code and you go, why have you just thrown .first in there and crazy stuff like that? And it's because I coded at like midnight to try and get this to work.
Hey, this is a judgment-free area. We can code whatever we want and whatever quality, as long as it works.
Oh yes,
right.
Yeah, the bars. I mean, you're coming on a place where we write code twice a week. So I mean, the bar has already been set very properly low.
Very low. Yeah, everybody can write better code than us. So if we can write code, then everybody else can write code.
Do you want me to show it to you? I'm sure you'd like.
Yeah,
that.
let's look. Let's see.
Yep.
So just so I'm clear, it's a voting app so that people who are after grants can go and vote for themselves, vote for causes that they like.
So people have got to submit their application to get some money for the grant, and it's the grant deciders that need to vote together.
And how many?
So they need to look through the list of applications and decide on which one to vote.
How many deciders would there typically be? Like order of magnitude, like 10, 100, 10, 5?
Yeah. Usually it depends on the client, but it's usually about 10. Because they're all talking usually in real time, but they may not be in the same room. Definitely not in the same room, I hope. At least they're social distancing.
I mean, you would think.
Yeah, exactly. And we thought about Teams, and to be honest with you, we were quite inspired by the estimate function on Teams, if there are any developers watching, where you go through and do your estimations, and it kind of gives you like the voting style of that. But we wanted to make something specific for the client. So I'll show you what happens. Usually is that my colleague, the way that he wanted this designed, is that they were going to create a logic app where they would go through and use Microsoft Dynamics, and they would drop in a calendar invite. So I'm going to show you my calendar here. Not very exciting. We've got committee review with an ID that they've created on, like, see here and here, on the Thursday and the Friday. And so when I load up the app, the web app, if I just refresh the page. So I've posted this all up so we can see this and we can publish this, and the durable entities I've actually pushed to my own subscription so we can destroy those as much as we want. And the first thing it does when it reaches this page is it asks you to log in. I've logged in for expediency. And here it's actually looked in my calendar and pulled out anything that says committee review. And what it's going to do is grab that ID and just carry that through as we go through the session. So here we can see the session has already started. And we've got another one, which is later on, which would start the session for this one. And if I click Join Session...
Could you zoom in just a couple taps?
Yeah, let me back out and then have a look. There we go.
Awesome, thank you.
We shall be known as the Zoom guys from now on. That has different connotations these days, but thanks for zooming in.
The idea is that I'd have another colleague somewhere else where they'd also go to the same site. So I'm going to join my session on the right-hand side, for example, and I'm going to span these out so we can see everything. So tell you what I'll do. I'll show you one so we can see the whole screen. What it's done when we go in there is it's actually gone through to Microsoft Dynamics and talked to an API endpoint, where the left-hand side, it's pulled through the different reviews. So I've got some mock data because my colleagues one's on holiday and the other one is preparing for another demo, ironically. So I thought we should mock some data for this to make sure that it actually works. And you can see that if I click, it does actually update my lovely review with my lovely review 2. So it does work, and that's my 2.5 hours of coding to get that working. Tearing my hair out at midnight, asking colleagues in Poland how on earth I pass through IDs on Razor pages, things like that. What we can do as well, if I scroll down, I'm going to say a little chat. So, hello, Simon. And my colleague on the other side, they're going to join the same session as well. And just expand out. I'm just going to refresh because this is just a demo thing. So we're going to say, hey, Simon. And the other one should say, hey, Simon as well. So, hey, back. Now, the reason I put in, now notice it's from myself here to myself. So, it's going to look like the same side, but if I was a different colleague logged in, it would come on the left-hand side. The reason I put a chat in there is basically because it came with the hello world of SignalR. I thought, why shoot? Honestly.
That's a good excuse. Why not live there? Yeah, I love it.
Exactly. Microsoft have coded this for me. Everything else is bonus. So I kid you not, the client's like, this is cool, this is chatting. I'm like, I did nothing. It's just all Microsoft about it.
Get our templates and you get this thing for free. I love it. Like, you download the template and you get a chat for free. Maybe you should stick more things there, like get your app and get Graph for free. I don't know.
That's it. That's right.
Thank you.
What we've got so far is a permanent storage of my chat over here, just because it's literally the cheapest, quickest hello world thing I can get. But if we move over to my lovely review, the first one where we've got no votes on this one, I kind of want to do this side by side so you can prove that it is actually real time. So we're on the same one over here, and I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to click. Apologies because I've zoomed in, it looks a bit crazy. But if you watch the left-hand side, we've got vote approve, and it'll go through and approve one and approve the other one over here. I can untick anonymized votes, so I can see my name come up here. And this was just to show that we could or could not remove names out of the voting, just for like proof for the client. I'm going to vote reject on this one. You'll see it goes through to reject, and Simon's rejected it. I can anonymize if I want to. And it grays out nicely when you voted approve or reject. And then if you finalize the application, one of the requirements from the client is that this sounds crazy, but it may become to a deadlock like this, or they may vote reject overall, even though everybody accepts it because of a certain reason, like they've broken the rules or something like that. So we have to have a separate finalization, vote approve or vote reject. And if I click vote approve, for example, if I expand out, then we get an error. Excellent. Let's try it on the.
It's fine. It's fine.
It's just like an API endpoint call. There we go. Application saved, which is great. So, yeah, it was quite good to rush this through in 3 days. Pretty painful when you've been up at 11 o'clock at night and when your colleague says it's got to work on the left hand side, but we got it over the line. Hilariously, in the demo, when my colleagues did it, I think they had some bad data in the dynamic side. But the second that the client tried it, apparently it just went smooth all the way through, which is exactly what you want, the right way around, as I said.
This is amazing. And the fact that you put this together in 3 days with all these different technologies just working together and talking to each other, it's a testament on how modern development can really speed up delivery. And when you focus on the actual business requirements rather than the technology, it allows you to move much faster.
For me, can I tell you a tiny bit about my experience when I went through this? Because a couple of surprising things.
Absolutely, go for it.
So remember, my background is IT support in the NHS. I've never really done coding for the last 3 years, and never done C# 3 years ago at all. I was only Python, which I taught myself. So by that fact, I'd never really done JavaScript. I mean, I did it back in the year 2000, but things have moved on a lot. Yeah, SignalR.
jQuery for the win. Come on.
Yeah. I think, well, everybody says that they kind of just go native now, I've noticed. They just kind of leave jQuery alone and just kind of shove it out the side and just use like native JavaScript. For me, when I was doing this, I was scared of a couple of things. You'll laugh because of the work that you two are in. I was petrified about authentication. I was like, how on earth do I get myself an app that logs me in, that does all of the authenticated stuff? And while I was trying out in the first few hours of trying this stuff out and doing a web app, I literally just ticked, I require this AD, I require authentication, and I'm going to use this AD, Active Directory, for my work. And it just says, here you go. Here's like the login, here's your logout, and it just works. So that was unbelievable for me, who had never really done anything like that before. SignalR was quite a big, nice surprise where, I tried this as part of my work, but I'd never tried it from scratch. So I thought, I don't know what it's like to set up. I don't know what it's like to get everything off the ground. And it turns out that it was so easy just to follow. Well, I followed the tutorials for the SignalR tutorials, and I actually tried 2 or 3 out. And what I did is I chose the shortest tutorials possible because you've only got 3 days, right?
Yeah.
So I kid you not, the one with JavaScript was like right-click Visual Studio, add in this npm package. We've already got it ready for you. The TypeScript one was, well, are you sitting down? Because there's quite a few steps. And I'm like, no, I'm done. Let's stick to JavaScript. I know I'm rubbish at it, but let's try that. You'll also find going through the code that I've kind of shoved everything in chat.js, which comes through with the hello world. And something nice, and a really nice surprise was, I thought, look, I've done Microsoft Graph before. I love Azure Functions, and I love durable entities. I've done that before. And I've even spent 4 nights trying to get Azure Functions to work with Microsoft Graph. And when you get it, it is amazing, absolutely amazing.
Yes.
But I've never done that with a web app before. And my experience was really MVC as well, so not Razor Pages. So it was quite nice to have different SignalR hello worlds, one with Razor Pages, one with MVC and this kind of thing. But it was this wonderful blog that saved me. And guess who wrote it? Look at the picture at the bottom.
That sounds familiar. That looks familiar. Oh, God.
So before we even met on Twitter, before you responded to this, just out of the blue, this was your blog that helped me get Microsoft Graph working on Razor Pages. And it was this actual blog that made me decide to go with Razor Pages rather than MVC, strangely enough.
Oh, there you go.
That's so sweet.
Yeah.
I'm going to move you two closer
I have
together
to say thank you because
on the video.
I literally, do you know what I did? And you'll laugh, is I looked for comments at the bottom so I could say thank you, but you blocked all comments. So I'm like, well, there you go.
Did I block all comments? That's
Well, there's no
You know
comments.
what? I think I removed the comments because I was using Discus.
Oh,
And then
yes.
Discus just went crazy with ads and requirements and privacy, and it broke so many things. I was like, in the end, it's not even worth it. If people want to reach out to me, they can always reach out to me on Twitter.
Yeah.
And this is what's happening these days. And I don't know, man. I even thought at some point to write my own Node.js engine for comments because apparently there's nothing decent out there. But at the same time, you have to deal with customer data. You have to deal with PII stuff. I was like, nah, it's not even worth it.
Yeah.
Let's dump it. But now I'm working for Identity. I'm thinking maybe we can use Azure AD B2C to authenticate people and allow them to,
Yeah.
maybe we can build, maybe JP, I think that's a brilliant idea. Now that I'm thinking about it, Simon gave me a fantastic idea. We should build a comments engine for blogs that you can just plug in, like this.
That sounds good.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
That sounds really good.
And authenticate using B2C.
But the only thing you can post are GIFs. You can't actually type any words.
Yes.
Yes.
GIFs only.
You have to speak with GIFs. That's the
Speaking
requirement.
of GIFs, hang on. I know this is a distraction, but speaking of GIFs, I was on the phone with somebody the other day, and this person said GIF, like the peanut butter. I couldn't believe it. I nearly fell out of my seat.
Whoa. What's this stuff?
You almost killed me, dude.
Sorry.
Come on.
I couldn't believe it. Because I'd heard of these people who pronounced it GIF, but I never knew I would meet anybody. In fact, was it our boss?
No. Hey, listen. You need to put a vote. You need to put a vote because I think this is a tabs and spaces problem.
No.
And you find it's very polarizing. There's no right or wrong
This
here.
is a proper English discussion. There's no debate. It's GIF with a hard G. I mean, the guy who made them, isn't that what he said? Here, we're gonna do a poll right now.
Yes, let's do a poll. By the way, talking about English, somebody that comes from outside the English language, and I had to learn it. It's funny because there are rules and then there are no rules. There are rules that break the rules for the English language. So things that you learn as as a kid, like I was learning the language. So an S between two vowels is pronounced as Z. But then again, you realize that half of the words in the English vocabulary are not following the rules, so it just drives you crazy. So the best description for the English language is it's a man wearing, like, it's three people wearing an overcoat, and these three people are stacked on top of each other. So there's three different languages stacked on each other, and they're wrapped into this code called modern English. So you got ancient Saxon, and then you got Latin, and then you got some French words. You get half the vocabulary is Greek, especially when you go into sciences. And then Quirkmachine is saying the guy who created them says
What?
GIF.
I don't.
Oh,
I don't
we need to find a video.
I don't believe it.
We need to find a video for that. That's insane. Anyway, I mean, for my perspective, I gave up on the English language and just go with the flow. So
Yeah.
if I'm speaking to youngsters, because I'm 42, so I'm not the spring chicken anymore. Youngsters tend to pronounce it GIF.
Oh my god.
And I think the
What?
person that pronounced it GIF said that his son is pronouncing it GIF. So see, it's these were people who say GIF. Ask them how they pronounce graphics.
Now there is
Yeah,
so
I
now
know.
the guy. Okay, so there's a website, because of course there is, called howtoreallypronounceGIF.com. Now, according to this, it's pronounced with a hard G, like gift. However, it says, I saw it a minute ago, the creator of GIF, the what's his name? He said, choosy developers choose GIF. Like,
Choosy developers.
well, because
That
that was
is
the thing. That was the thing called. That was like Jif is a peanut butter brand in the U.S. at least, and the branding or the marketing when I was a kid was choosy kids choose Jif, and they're saying so, but according to this website, which anybody could go stand up a website, it says. It says that the pronunciation with a hard G is now very widespread and readily understood. So
I don't think so. So somebody needs to learn to teach all the, I don't know, what are the 20 to 30 year olds these days? What is this generation called? Gen Z?
I think that's right. Yeah.
Somebody needs
After
to-
millennials, post millennials, I think is Gen Z.
Post millennials, there you go.
Yeah.
Let's be politically correct. Let's not label people.
Here's a shirt that
Anyway.
says, here, you can get a shirt that says, I pronounce GIF with a hard G. I need that shirt now.
This
Okay.
new dark versus light mode argument. Yeah, I mean, it's spaces versus tabs, and we don't want to go into that. We are, you know what? I think we are inclusive. You can pronounce it
Yeah, I mean,
whichever way you like.
You could call it, you could call it whatever you want. That's true. We don't care. You can do it however you would like. We have no
Quiff or I don't know. We're not opinionated. How about that?
we have no beef. However you'd like to pronounce GIF. If you'd like to pronounce GIF correctly or incorrectly, that is totally up to you.
Come as you are. We love everyone. There you go.
That's right. Okay, sorry.
Even the people that pronounce it GIF.
Well, hang on. Anyway, I'll put a link to the.
Where's the poll, man? Come on.
I created a poll. It's already out there.
I missed it.
But
did I miss it? Who's winning?
right now, GIF with a hard G is winning.
Yeah.
Oh, snap.
Yeah.
At least our audience is aligning with us. But as I said, we are inclusive.
Well, we're in it's an echo chamber then. So.
To be honest, yeah, most of the people on the chat are friends or close friends or people I've worked with in the past. So maybe it's not representative.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, sorry, Simon. You're going to get you're going to get 2 minutes into your presentation.
Well, that's time up. I hope that was good. Right, bye.
Right. So should we see some code?
Yes, please. Alrighty. So this was about a month ago. I have studied the code, but I've not looked at ChatJS for about a month, so I'm going to have to wipe off the dust and dirt, if that's all right.
Absolutely fine.
And you mentioned something's looking at your calendar and that you've got some integration with CRM. Is that like Dynamics CRM?
So yes, it is. So it's Dynamics 365.
Nice.
But what my colleagues did for this is that they set up some API endpoints on Swagger, so I could actually just call JSON and throw it backwards and forwards up to them in JSON and then back from them in JSON. So they kind of put their own endpoints on Dynamics.
Okay, cool.
So there's an API in front of your Dynamics.
It's sort of like an API proxy?
Yeah, that's right.
Cool.
That's right.
All right.
So kind of create their own kind of...
That's a nice way to to control access to Dynamics, right?
Yes,
so you don't really
very much.
Abuse it.
Yeah.
I think that's a nice way.
Well, and historically, I remember like Dynamics at one point had two endpoints. One was like a legacy XML SOAP-like endpoint, and the other one was like a more modern one. But the more modern one had really limited set of functionality.
Ah, right.
Yeah.
I think this is the move from .NET Framework moving into .NET Core, where I was integrating with CRM directly for some other Azure Functions type stuff, where, for example, it gives a summary of everybody's day and things like that, or people's timesheets and things like that. And it broke my heart that I had to use .NET Framework for just the longest time until about last year, where I kid you not, my colleague said they've just released the 0.01 alpha of the .NET Core SDK for CRM. I'm like, I'm in. I'm all in, all the way through. And I've never looked back, and it's been brilliant. So
if it has a number, I'm trying it. Even if it's 0001 or 5, right?
Hey, thanks for following us.
Do it internally in your company. Don't do it production. Oh my goodness, don't do that.
Thanks for following us, Baker's Baked Bread, by the way.
Yes, thanks for the follow.
Yeah.
I'm on Twitch a lot, and I love some of the Twitch names. That's a great Twitch name. That's good.
I'm sorry, what was your...
Now you're making me feel bad. Azure Chill is awesome. Christos Matskas is so unimaginable. Like, it's like boring.
Simon, what's your Skype name again, Simon?
My Skype name is, I have to explain to everybody watching. I grew up in Birmingham, the second biggest city in England, and I actually grew up, I went to school opposite Cadbury's factory where they make the chocolate, the Cadbury's chocolate. And every Easter they bring out Cadbury's cream eggs. So I thought, I used to have a really bad, rude email address when I was growing up as a teenager. And I thought, now that I'm growing up and I need to present myself to the world, I want something more memorable. So I actually went with melted cream egg. So if you think of Cadbury's and their cream eggs, imagine one melted. I thought that's a quite good image to go with melted cream egg.
Easter's never going to be the same.
That is so sweet.
Yeah. So everyone, welcome to Visual Studio. I'm sure you all know it well. I've got two projects that I had going on here. So I actually started off this whole project with trying out SignalR, like I said before, and starting out a Razor Pages web app, which we can see here, with the whole startup and models and things like this. You can see the whole program, and I've got my vertical tabs. If you've never done vertical tabs before, I highly recommend them. So set tab layout.
Oh, wait! Before we get started, show everyone how you set up your Visual Studio, because I learned something after 14. How many years? Wait, after 18 years of using Visual Studio, all the versions across time. It's the first time I saw this one, and that comes courtesy of Mr. Mats Christensen, right?
That's right, exactly.
Yes.
So, I'll explain. I used to walk to work before COVID, and so on my walk, I used to watch a lot of Ignite, a lot of Build, and one of these videos was from Mads Christensen that explained exactly what I'm going to show you, which is that if you're doing a presentation in Visual Studio, it may be in dark mode, which is your preferred method, which is my preferred method, but may not be good for presenting. And then you don't want to have to go zoom in on every single page, which I've seen other people do in presentations. You kind of want to set the font size, but then you're going to have to reset everything back when you go back to work. So there's a little trick you can do, is you can actually pull up Visual Studio and give it a profile. So the way you do that is by typing in, it's the developer command prompt. So if you go developer, you'll see it comes up in Windows developer command prompt for VS 2019. I've got one open here. The command you type in is dev-env, which is obviously Visual Studio. If you've ever gone to Task Manager, you'll see that. But here we add a root suffix, and this demo word can be anything you want. So I could say dev-env root suffix Simon, and if I hit enter, what it will do is it will start Visual Studio, like I've got here, but with Simon at the top right, so you can actually see which profile you're under. And now you can go into your tools, options, environment, and set your font size, and now you've got font as big as you want across the whole of Visual Studio. And the same goes for extensions as well, as Mad explains. It will bring this back to a basic version of Visual Studio so that maybe your extensions don't get in the way of your presentation and things like that.
Very nice. So if you're using ReSharper, for example, you don't have to cut it over if you're doing a demo, because maybe you want to show some native features and you don't want to enable disable all the time.
Exactly.
So can you?
You heard it here first, people.
Can you zoom the whole interface? Like, can you zoom like Solution Explorer and stuff like that, or is it just essentially like profiles for settings?
It's more profiles for settings.
Okay.
Anything you can do in settings will be towards this profile.
Yeah. Okay.
I would be willing to bet that zooming a solution would be, you'd have to zoom in Windows and put your whole, go into Windows settings and change all that kind of stuff around. And I don't think there's a profile for that unless you want to create one on a Windows level.
Yep.
I'm just going to do my presentation.
Simon, I think you got some fantastic feedback. I think you can retire after this one. Neil Gilbert is saying, Simon, also known as Carl Hansen. There you go, man. That's you down for the day.
Oh my goodness.
Tab Studio.
I've seen some.
You can stop here. Brilliant.
Scott Hanselman is like, punching code and just debugging stuff on a Raspberry Pi remotely via VS Code Insiders back in the day, and I was like, wow, that's some amazing stuff. Yeah, it's pretty good.
We have El Capitan Squirrel says, slightly related, I'm a big fan of tabstudio.com, which is an add-in to group up files, etc. Been using it for years. Yeah, people, just let us know which extensions you use and which tools you use, because it's nice to share here knowledge and help other fellow developers be more productive.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you've not tried the new Git experience as well, I highly recommend turning that on. I think it's really, really good. You'll find it under the preview features of tools options in Visual Studio as well. It's one of the preview features that I think is quite well done and definitely ready for GA very soon. So let me show you some of the project. I started out...
Back to the code at some point. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, might as well get around to it. So I started off with index, of course. And so when index loads, it really comes down to here where we have a look and it says on get. It's pretty much the first thing that it does. And so I want to show you this in context with the page. So when we go back to our grants page, it's doing two things when it loads this screen. One is it needs to pull my calendar and then display this nicely. Two is it needs to then cross those IDs, which it pulls out, with my Azure Functions to work out which session is active or not. The way that I thought about this as I was going through it is I thought, look, I've got my SignalR, I've got Christos's brilliant blog to help me do graph stuff. But I had a problem when I was trying to do little steps as I went through this. I said, right, now I've got my SignalR, how can I can vote, but how do I add those votes up centrally? And I thought, right, can I have some kind of cache storage on SignalR front The answer is kind of. So you can kind of have SignalR caching, but it's per user per session, which is no good if you're going to centrally combine figures together. And I do love, I've learned, as every developer knows, you learn little lessons as you go through life. And one of them is if you go against the grain, or in my case, if you go against Microsoft documentation, good luck. And it said in the Microsoft documentation, if you want to store something important, don't do it in cache. I was like, all right, you've got me. Fine. I will, I don't know, bring up a database. And I thought, look, I've only been doing this for a couple of years. I'm usually jumping onto projects that are existing. I've never really done managed migrations with Entity Framework database first. I didn't know what Entity Framework or Link was 3 years ago. So I thought, well, for speed alone, let's just go down the durable functions route, because I know that and I love some of the work that the team are doing on it. So I thought, why don't I just try and use SignalR with durable functions? And you'll see that code come up as we go through this. And then towards the end of that day, when I got that working, I thought, let's bring in Microsoft Graph. And so hence your blog came into it. And you'll literally see, before I even go on, check out this profile.cshtml. Does it ring any bells? It is literally pulled from your blog. And I just left it in just for fun.
Yes, I can see that. One of the things that you, one of the things I think I pinged you and mentioned is that these things have significantly been simplified with the release of Microsoft Addended Web. So a lot of the code that we put early on in that blog post and here can actually go away in a much more performant and improved way.
Nice. That sounds really good. When I went through this, I thought you stuck to user profiles and user.read, and it wasn't a big jump to say, well, what are the permissions I need for calendars then? And what's the objects and the properties and the methods I need to go get that? So I literally started with these kind of lines and copied and pasted them and started Googling the Microsoft Docs, or what do I need for permissions for calendars? And is it calendar.read? Is it calendars.read? So that came out in the wash as we go through. But anyway, what this does is it says, right, go to an async. I'm going to go grab my graph client with the appropriate permissions. I'm going to go grab the details for myself. But remember, this is me guessing how to get the calendar just through IntelliSense and IntelliCode.
Very nice.
Yeah, it was. I got there eventually, and I was actually copying your example with the me.profile.stuff. So I thought, well, how about me.calendar.events? And then you had on your blog .request.getAsync, and I was like, that's probably the same thing. Put a breakpoint here. Oh, that's exactly what I need, which is great. So now I've got my list of calendar events, which I think are future only. Don't quote me on that. So I said, so quite simply, what we're going to do is grab the subjects, and where we've got that committee review in any case, then go through and get a regular expression of, do you remember that CR-1000 I had in there?
Yes.
It's the ID. So I thought, well, let's just grab the digits from that, which is this bit here. So my reg becomes my match of my value over here. So my ID I grab from the match of that CR-.
Yep.
It's uppercase CR because that's what my colleague told me to do. So it could be lowercase if you want to change that.
Quick question.
Yeah.
You are so you've got a little bit higher up. You've got a method called getGraphClientAsync. What does getGraphClient or Graph Service Client? What does that do?
All right, let's have a look. I think I actually pulled this from your blog and I just put it in the same place.
Nice.
Yeah. So get token acquisition and then the graph settings. I had a problem with this earlier in the day when I was trying. What I've done, just to explain, so a couple of tiny caveats. The first one's not tiny. The first one is I didn't do the front end. At the end of the first day, my colleague said, how's it going? And I said, I need more time and I need a front end because I've tried doing CSS and HTML and I can't do that in 3 days, let alone all of this out. Yeah. So the front end is a fantastic design, which took about a day for my colleague, which is really, really great. The other one is that, as I said, I've had to mock some of the Microsoft Dynamics data from that API endpoint. But all the original code is still there, and it's all on my GitHub. If you want to have a look, github.com/Mr. Simon C. Because I'm Simon Crouch, so that's my name. It's one of the few things that make sense with my usernames. The rest don't. Let's have a look. So we've got my graph client in my index. That's better. Let's go back to my onGraph with my details. So now at this point, I've got my ID. And then I'm going to start populating this committee review events thing. So if I jump back to F12, you can see it's actually just a list of objects, which are committee review events, and that object is defined with a description, whether it started or not, and a committee review ID. I could have just called that ID.
Very nice. Now, a question back here. One of the things that you could optimize in the future if you want to is you can actually filter the events during the query.
Ooh, nice.
And pull out just the CR-D events, so you don't have to for each them and then select the ones that you want to. So that's an option you can do as part of the query to the graph, because it's a very powerful API.
Yeah, and
that's pretty good.
And there's some new ones too, so that you can select just the bare minimum that you need. So if you don't need, because especially the newer endpoints, they've got 4 million fields on a calendar object. If you want, if you only need 2 of them, do a select on the 2 or 3 that you need, and then combine that with the filtering, and your query times will be super, super short, which is awesome.
Right.
And then you can dump a new committee review event and bind directly to the results of that query. So it can be super optimized. But then again, these are things that you discover as you work more and more with Graph and Azure AD.
Well, a lot of that
great work so far.
A lot of that functionality just got lit up too. Just like I think it was just announced at Ignite, right? So I mean, it's quite new. So
that's nice. That's really, really good. Yeah, I looked into all this kind of stuff and using OData and things like that. But when it's at the end of when it comes to the end of the day, and you've just about got SignalR working with Azure Functions, and you've written this blog post, I'm like, just put this line in, and I'll just do it the most basic way possible. No optimization.
Yeah.
And because this was like the first start page, I hadn't even gotten onto the bigger page. I was like, oh my goodness. So my review events is now populated, which is actually because of the way. Now this was new to me because of the way that Razor Pages works. Because it's a public property at the top. It's actually just accessible straight away from your CSHTML. So
isn't it fantastic?
There it is on my model.
Yeah.
No need to do any model parsing and stuff like that. So very, very simple CSHTML where it just goes through and says, all right, let's just populate it. And then what I'm going to do is have my hidden committee review ID, which is the one that somebody selects. And I'm going to grab that and pass that back to my onPost method. Now, another funny thing you'll spot for those astute amongst you is this bit here. I put ASB action equals enter voting on voting form, but that actually, you'll laugh at me. I did this earlier. I went Control T, so Control C to copy, Control T, because I love Control T, paste, and it doesn't exist. And I'm like, why on earth doesn't this exist?
How does this thing work?
Yeah, how did I make this? And the answer is you don't need it because it's on post is the default routing that occurs when you post anything back without custom handling on Razor web pages. So I was like, okay, all right then. So I could have called it Simon's lovely non-existent method, and it would still hit on post async. And so there's that committee review ID being passed back. I'm going to check if the model is valid, as pretty standard stuff. And then at this point, I'm going to put a reference into my Azure function just to say we're going to set has started,
nice.
Which is quite cool. And then we're going to redirect. Before I move on, I'm just going to finish off this bit and we'll explain. We'll talk about this bit a bit more. And I'm going to redirect and hand over to my voting page, which is over here, which I'll click in a second, and then pass through the meeting ID as the thing we've just selected. Now, I remember when we first talked, you said, what authentication do I have on my Azure Functions? And I said,
that's why I was
you know what? I'm not going to lie, because I love being honest and truthful, because that's who I am. It took me 24 hours to respond, because I didn't have the heart to tell you I had none. It was awful. I was like, I'm just using the key. And in fact, if anybody knows anything about Azure Functions, there are different types of keys, one per function, and then there's the master key, which you can use for all functions. And I said, look, to get this across the line, I'm going to use the master key. So, yeah. It's so bad. I was like, this is really awkward. Yeah, not production. Don't do this for production.
Yeah, just don't scroll your window over so we don't see the rest of the key.
Do not put the whole key there, but people can start guessing.
I was a tiny bit stressed in the last few days because I knew that this exact screen would come up with all of this kind of stuff. And the answer is, I went through and I thought, shall I just remove this out and make this an environment variable? And I did. And then it wouldn't run. And I was like, oh my God, what have I done? The answer is this grants entities example is we're going to destroy this after the session. So you guys can all know the master key and it doesn't matter one bit at all. So that's absolutely fine. And the worst case is you're just going to vote up way more than, the 1 or 2. If it's like 2,000 by the end of this presentation, then we know that these guys have actually cracked the master key and have gone through and
we're rigging the election, but we want to protect against that, right? We don't want to have a rigged election. We want to make it secure.
Yeah. Oh, goodness. So all of this stuff could be, and what I did do is I did replace this with earlier, environment dot get environment variable, beep, 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 beep. So what did I say? Set has started. So I put set has started URL. And then that, you could then put that into an app setting function and then just put all of this code into that. And then you don't need the if debug. You can actually just take this out and then just have one for development, one for production, and that kind of thing. It's definitely something I would do if I was going to do this live for a customer and do it properly and things like that.
You can also stick it into a secrets file. So rather than putting an environment variable, you can have a secrets file. There are different ways to skin these cats. I mean, if you want to be super secure or paranoid, you can put it into Key Vault. So you can have a secret in Key Vault, and then you can have ASP.NET Core pull that at runtime using managed identities, so you don't have to worry about grabbing the key. So you can have two different ways of securing that. One is hiding the URL and not making it accessible to everyone, and then the second one will be adding some authentication here, so you pass a bearer token back to the Azure function that has to validate, because at that point, when somebody manages to execute the function, there's nothing stopping me or anybody else that knows that URL from voting. But if they were authenticating against Azure AD, then that means that they can't bypass that unless they have an account with the org.
Is that what they call easy auth?
You can use easy auth, or you can roll out proper authentication in Azure Functions and validate the token as it comes in.
Okay, that's definitely something I need to look into. I think that's really, really good.
Yeah, easy auth is nice because once you've enabled it, it happens. The token validation is all handled by easy auth, so you actually don't write any code to do any of the validation. And in .NET, at least, there are some packages that make it even easier to grab that. I think Maxime Rie, he wrote an extension for functions specifically for getting token data so that you can sort of interact with the user and know who they are through normal like claims principles instead of having to go and parse a token yourself and do all that stuff. But you can at least get validation of that token all done for you so that if you get one, you know it's been validated. So
that's really good. Yeah. That's the kind of thing I find exciting. I think that's really, really good. So at this point in our flow, we've now clicked start session, and it's gone up to our Azure function and hit that and save that ID against our durable entity. Let me just show you set has started, which is before we move on. So set has started. What I've done in the API over here is when I have the function name, I usually put run and then the function name, because my tip is when you're searching for it, it won't search for that in Control-T. See? And also, you need a unique value. You can't always have run, which is the default hello world on every function for an HTTP function.
Yep.
So it's quite nice to have something.
Wait a minute. If you type set has started, you can't find the function with Control-T?
If I call my function a run,
not run. Set has started. You won't find it?
Let's try it. Boom, boom, boom. So the moment it's found it in my grants entities, which is different. And my interface, my grants entities, not my actual function. See?
I think that's. Oh, so it searches for functions. It's so if you rename that to set has started, for example, don't put.
Yeah, that will find it absolutely.
That will find it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's
so
just because
Control T searches for files, file names, function names, property names.
Yeah.
But it doesn't search into attributes. That's why you can't find it.
Correct. Very good. Another little tip which I love on a day-to-day basis is methods are usually the first thing you're looking for. So if I'm looking for set has started, if you type M, it's the equivalent of pressing the top one up here, which is quite nice. So set has, and then you've straight away got just my methods. Do you remember how it's picking up my my interface before on my entity?
Yep.
So now that's if I remove that out, I get all of that back. Or so I put M in front, and that's just my method, and then I can jump straight to it, which is really, really nice.
Nice.
All right. So let's have a look. This one is pretty standard durable entity stuff that you can pull from the Microsoft Docs, which is I'm going to go grab my request and let's have a look. Deserialize my request body into grant information.
Yep.
And grant information is things like ID, name, description, URL, date, and amount.
Mm-hmm.
I'm cheating here because setAsStarted only needs to set an ID and a bit value, really. The ID of the committee, like the session that we're starting, and then the bit to say we've started. But I thought what I'll do is I'll be a bit sneaky, and just for time's sake, I'll just use one single entity, which you'll find over here in my entities under grant or iGrant. So here, this is actually all the details of the whole session, the description, the SharePoint URL, all the stuff I'm displaying when I'm in my session. But I'm cheating. I'm adding this little property here rather than making a whole new entity, just because I just want to speed through it. If I was doing this properly, I'd have another session entity and do it that way. So here I am. I'm going through. I've got my entity ID, and then I'm going to signal my entity, which is what we do from a client Azure function, as opposed to an orchestrator function where you can talk backwards and forwards to your entities. And I'm using the interface method of durable functions where I can actually use a proxy at this point to set the method. Otherwise, I'd have to pass a text string to say set has started. And it's quite nice to have that object naming going on, which is great. Another tiny, really, really important thing, which I worked out weeks before when I was playing around with durable entities, is when you're creating your entity ID here, which is essentially a reference to do something with it, like signal it, for example. The docs are a little bit lacking here in the first entity name. So I put entity name, Simon's lovely entity. And then the second one, I've got my entity key of, well, that could be my ID, things like that. But then I defined my entity as Grant rather than Simon's lovely entity. And what they don't tell you here, it says create an entity ID for an entity, that's what it's doing. And then the entity name, my first parameter, is the name of this class of entities, right? That should actually be the exact name of the type of entity you are creating. So if I call it Grant, that must be Grant here. If I called it, and I could put this, Simon's entity, I really need to create a class of type Simon's entity. Otherwise, it won't know what to do.
Right.
That was quite a big lesson, which they give you a tiny little line in the docs, just one little line. By the way, this has to be the type. And just for ages, I'm like, why doesn't this work? So there you have it. If I jump back into my index, we've now set the setAsStarted, which is great. So the next time we load in that page, my onGet will go grab, if I'm looking at my onGet. As it goes through, this get has started is going to show us that binary, are we going to join the session or start the session? And jumping into get has started, I've created an entity helper class, which says get the current grant status, and it passes through my grant ID and then my HTTP client. So if I have a look in grant entity status, all it's going to do is pretty simple code to say, go to my get votes API and just call it. And then I'm going to grab that type back as grant and return that result as my grant status there.
Nice. Now,
So
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Why did you decide to go with a durable function and not just a normal function? Since it's a fire forget kind of thing, isn't it?
Kind of. There are different. So there's durable functions and there's durable entities. Durable functions are orchestrator functions, which you kick off via an Azure function. And then this orchestrator will say, right, this Azure function has just asked me to go through a set loaded process of different things. So I'm going to call some activity functions as part of my orchestrator. And I'm going to remember where I am in that flow. So I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do that. Don't confuse that with durable entities. Durable entities are stateful objects that act very much and are underneath exactly the same as orchestrator functions, but they hold state in the default of Azure storage, but it can be actually placed like in a Redis cache or something like that. Mm-hmm. And you can call these and signal these both normal Azure functions and orchestrators. So if we leave orchestrators, which are durable functions, alone for a second, I've grabbed durable entities and Azure functions together. So I'm kind of cheating that fantastic bit, which I use for other stuff, the orchestrator functions, but I don't need that. It's actually overkill for what I'm doing.
So can you use a durable entity independently of a durable function?
Absolutely, yes. And that's exactly what I'm doing.
Oh, that's cool. They sound kind of like actors, right? Like almost like a service fabric actor, right?
Yeah,
that's
exactly
what they were based on. So as you can probably tell, I've watched lots of Microsoft videos about this. They took the. Did you know, another little fun fact, maybe you don't know this, when you go and create a new resource in Azure, it will go away and kick off a durable framework set of tasks that will go away and say, right, I've created the first thing I need, then the second thing I need is going to be this thing, and if something blows up and it crashes, then it will go back and say, right, this thing has crashed, but where did I get up to? Right, my durable framework says I'd done step 1, I'm now going to redo step 2. Durable framework was what gave birth to durable entities. So durable framework was what the team in Microsoft had been using for years. And then the Azure Functions team said, do you realize this could be quite cool if we kind of mix these technologies together? And so I watched an amazing talk where the durable framework team said, yeah, we actually came in and helped the team out on Azure Functions and created durable entities out of it. So
nice.
Pretty cool.
No, that's awesome.
Thank you. Thanks for explaining that. Yeah.
We are getting our votes at the moment, so this is pretty, again, standard stuff. Again, this is what I love, is all of this code is out there. It just takes me to kind of glue it together. When you know it's there, and you go, actually, yeah, this is not too bad.
Yep.
Put this into my details. Another tiny tip that I've come up with is, you'll find this on my GitHub repo as well, and it's just for me, is that I found that you've got a lot of different evolving technologies from the Microsoft docs, from durable entities and things like this, where I kid you not, it's great, but the Microsoft docs get halfway down the durable entities and they say, if I were you, you could do it this way, but if you're really serious, dive off to this page and do it that way.
Oh.
So I'm like, right, okay, and that is where that this bit here. Do you see how it says the proxy? Add proxy. What it says is, when you're creating the proxy, what you can do is create an interface for your durable entity, but that interface only needs to have the methods on it.
Oh.
And that's the jumping off page bit I'm on about, where it's best practice to create an interface for your entity so that you can go proxy.method name. Otherwise, again, you'd have to retype out, add approve votes, and just hope you get the string correct.
Right.
And then you've got no type checking at design time.
So it creates like a strongly typed interface to your SignalR, so you don't screw up your casing and your naming, right?
Strongly typed to your durable entity, yes.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, we haven't even gotten to SignalR. Now we get to the exciting bit. See?
Jumping around, all excited.
Yeah.
So, quick question while you're pulling that up. So,
Yes.
what sort of overhead have you seen in using, like, in particular, in using the durable entities? Like, is there a noticeable sort of delay when accessing them, like more so than if you were to say deserialize a message from a queue or make a query to table storage or something? Like, is it noticeable, or is it still pretty fast?
It's still pretty fast. Whenever you deserialize anything, that's going to be pretty quick.
Yeah.
But the way that the interesting thing I found when going through this, and you'll see this in the code, is that it's not like writing to a database, but that's actually a good thing. As I watched other things, it came up with, well, how would you even create collaborative spreadsheets or things like that with a database? And the answer is it's really, really hard, because you've got to have somebody moving around and then writing entries as somebody else is moving around, and those entries have somehow got to line up. And so what happens with these kind of things is that you signal a durable entity from a client Azure function, as opposed to a durable function, an orchestrator. And when you signal it, you just say, right, I'm going to throw this signal over to the durable entity. I don't care how long it takes to get there. Right. I just know it's going to get there.
Right.
Yeah. And so you've got this slight delay. In practice, I found it was a couple of seconds. But that was just enough to cause me issues where... Honestly, a couple of seconds is fantastic when you've got somebody else joining a meeting and you need to, for example, populate the current votes, which is what I do as part of this. So if I refresh the page on one of these ones and I've got some votes of like 1 or 2, and then I come over here and I refresh, or maybe just click the left-hand side because it does the same thing, you'll see that my votes are actually populated still.
Yeah.
That has pulled from the durable entity and will show me the current state of votes. But what happens if I click vote reject and then immediately ask to read? Because I thought, well, another way of doing it is you come into the page and you could, terrible idea, but you could click vote reject then pull the current state, then signal the durable entity to say, right, we're 1-1, and now I'm going to write in 2. I think actually it was the other way around. I apologize. What you could do is you could vote reject by signaling the entity and then immediately read it.
Yeah.
That's what I was doing, because I thought, right, I voted my reject. I kind of want to be in line with everybody else because somebody else might have voted reject at the exact same instant. I want to be able to update my figures here.
Right.
Right.
And what I found was there was just enough of a few seconds to have a problem with reading the state of that durable entity versus signaling it. So what do I mean? I mean, if you're going to signal entity, that just takes a fraction of a second, right? But it's going to then sit into essentially the Azure storage queue of instructions it needs to do with that entity, just like an orchestrator function. And it will eventually get around there, and it will eventually get into the state. And so when you're asking to pull the state of that entity, I'm doing it so fast that I've actually thrown my signal of my vote reject, and I'm pulling the 2 1s out because that's the current state. Because that vote of 2 votes to reject and 1 vote to approve, which is what it should be, hasn't reached the signal yet, hasn't reached that entity and been stored in the storage.
Hasn't been persisted yet.
Yeah, exactly. So it's actually a couple of seconds, but it's enough to make a difference when you're doing something this real time.
Well, so one more question.
So the way
one more question.
Yes, go ahead.
Are the durable entities, are they single threaded and locked like the actors or the stateful actors in Service Fabric, where you can be guaranteed that you and somebody else aren't going to write at the same time?
100% correct.
Okay, cool.
Exactly
okay,
right.
So essentially it's like a Service Fabric actor for functions, what it sounds like. Oh, nice. Okay, cool.
The active pattern is one I had to learn when I was learning about durable entities, and it was based on that, absolutely. So what it essentially does, it throws it into a queue, and then that queue gets processed all the way down, where nothing, we can keep throwing stuff at the queue in any order. It'll make it all the way down into the entity and update it that way.
Cool.
Alrighty. I think we should move on to the voting page, because we're pretty much talking about it. So at this point, I've got my meeting ID. I've saved my state up to my durable entity about whether we've started the session or not. And I'm now going to go into my very, very simple, hopefully on-get, if I can find it. Yeah, on-get async of my voting page, my main page, essentially. So the first thing I've got to do is when I'm entering in that, I may be entering into a session that's already started. So I need to refresh all of the details by pulling that through, and then obviously refresh the votes that we've got. So I'm going to call refresh grant applications async. And in this one, I'm going to grab all of my details. So Microsoft Dynamics, I've called CRM for like customer resource management. So get all CRM applications is going to go off to this one and essentially go and call that API I talked about, where my colleague call it docket. So that's, you see, like get docket ID. It's just a naming thing that my colleague came up with. What the code would have done is go down here and go to that URL, grab some stuff with our CRM objects. But I'm going to mock the data response here, and you can peek the definition here by just saying, just return me a new list of CRM responses. And these are things like a name with a review ID and the request ID. Very, very, very simple. And then with that result, I can then go through and pull out the name, pull out the review, create a list from it for my application list. And then in my application list, I'm then going to fill out those details. So essentially, I've got a high-level list at this point, and I haven't got the details of the description and things like that. So I'm going to go through a quick for each, where for each one, I'm going to go grab all the details by ID. Again, I'm just going to mock the data here, but I would have grabbed it from a JSON endpoint, where in the response, I'm going to say, look, I need to repair the school roof. It's going to be 100 float, whatever credit that is. In our case, it's pounds because we're in the UK. And then I'm then just going to return that application list, which has been updated by my extra API calls to that endpoint. Then if I just back up, there we go, fantastic. So I've now grabbed all of the details from that response there with my list of applications, which has got detail in it now. And then I can add the range to my list of grant applications. And if I go F12 to look at the definition of that one, that again is very similar to what I had before, where I'm creating bind property on this list because it's just a public property. Bind property, there's no judgment here, right?
Nope.
I literally just saw that on one of the pages, and I went, look, I know that it was a public property and it worked last time, but this tutorial I was reading about this kind of thing online said, look, you can bind property with the bind property attribute. I thought, I'll leave that in, and if it works, I'll just leave it alone. So it worked, and I just left it alone. So you could actually potentially get rid of bind property. I think it's just if you're writing back to it directly on the CSHTML page, that's when you need it. So we've refreshed all the grant details at that stage, which is great. So we've now loaded up our page over here. That's it. So now at this point, the code's going to go over to the CSHTML page, which is where it gets interesting. So, right, this is the fun bit. This is where, and I've not looked at this for a month, so you'll have to forgive me. We're going to go through and we're going to have all of the details in our applications. We've got our IDs, and we're going to put out their names with the start dates on it. This is where we've got that response to say if the application has been saved or not when we click, overall vote or approve. But then I'm going to type out all that name, the delivery, the recipient, things like this. CRM link if we want to click those ones. And again, this is where I was typing in at 11 o'clock at night to 1 a.m. in the morning, just a .first.name. So if this blows up in any way, shape or form, because there is no current review ID, which is what happened in the demo, then it will just blow up and and I'm like, what? I don't care. It's like 3 days worth of coding. I'm not going to make this pretty. I do really like this two-string currency 0, culture info, current culture, which you set above at the top. And that just changes any normal value into pounds or dollars or whatever you need to do. I just love that little kind of an extension on two-string. Etc., etc. We've got the vote or approve buttons, which are pretty standard. We're going to have the chat details coming up on the right-hand side with all the details. Obviously, the front-end designer wanted to put in the time and the name of when they chatted, but I thought that was too much for what we were trying to do. And then comes into the interesting stuff, the SignalR stuff.
Yes.
A real interesting point, which took me half an hour to 20 minutes of Googling or binging, I apologize.
No. We're inclusive here. Use the tools that you love.
Is how do I get, now this is quite interesting for me, not coming from a JavaScript background, is how can I get my models details into JavaScript, especially to be used inside of a file name? And the answer is, whenever you create something like a var in JavaScript, it essentially sits at a global level. So what I'm doing with my logged in user is I'm grabbing that HTTP context to user.identity.name that I'm sure we'll know and love. And then I can use that in my JavaScript as I come down. Also my grant number, which is my ID, which I've got from my model, and also my current review ID, which is, I think it's the session that we're in. And you'll see when we go into SignalR.js, I think SignalR.js is the standard SignalR JavaScript library that we don't need to edit. But chat.js, which should be over by www.root, let's have a little look at that one.
So, quick question for you.
Sure.
So there were three. So you got three variables down there. We've got username. We've got what was that? Grant number and review ID.
Yep. That's right.
So is there so two questions. First.
Yeah.
Is there ever a scenario where somebody would be able to see maybe grant 4 but not grant 5? And is there ever a case where somebody would be able to see current review 17 but not be able to see current review 40? And then if I was to just go and change those, say I just went and changed those in JavaScript myself, right, and somehow managed to connect to a different session, like is there anything that would keep that from? Let me rephrase the question.
Right, I love that.
What sort of stuff could we do?
I get it.
What sort of stuff could we do to make sure that I only see the stuff that I need to see, right?
Yeah. Well, I thought about this, and I thought it's quite loosely coupled, just having a subject name in your calendar have the ID of the thing that you're supposed to be in. And I thought, at a very minimal level, what you could do technically is in the code here is not just look in your calendar, but have if you want to go down that calendar route, which my colleague wanted to, because he wanted to kind of combine things together, is I said we could technically pull the list of attendees per meeting that you've been invited to. And then if your name is actually in the invite list, then you get to see that ID.
Oh, I see.
I thought
that's a neat way.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's quite like, it's a bit of a different way. It's probably the most non-standard thing I can think of.
Well, no, but I mean, as a set of authorization rules, that's actually pretty interesting. Like, essentially,
yeah.
If you got an invite, then you can be there. And if you didn't get the invite, you can't be there. I mean, it sounds perfectly valid, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless somebody shares that invite, right? So if somebody shares the invite, then more people are joining.
Yeah. And this is it. I thought, well, who controls the invite?
That's right.
And I was like, interesting. So maybe there has to be some kind of, I would say there needs to be some kind of official list which then attempts to send out the invite, but the invite itself is not the keeper of who gets to go.
I think there's a flag.
It could be like
I think there's a flag too that says this meeting can't be forwarded.
Do not forward or do not share.
Yeah.
You're right.
So maybe something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
And then
or a SharePoint list or a database of just people with usernames that can get into the meeting. That's quite a nice way of doing it.
And then we'd have to enforce that.
Again, that adds that complexity.
And then you'd have to enforce that essentially in each meeting, like in each. If I hit a page, you'd have to check to see. You check via graph, right? Of is this user a member of this specific grant and this specific review session or whatever, right?
I think you've just thought of something really clever there, which is you could have different people in different AD groups.
Yeah.
And so you could say reviewer level 1, reviewer level 2, level 3, and then like the lower priced grants, everybody can be part of.
Yeah.
But the ones that are like $1 million, $1 million, only like 10 people in a specific AD group can actually go to those meetings. Yeah. And then it doesn't matter about the meeting invite. You can forward it to whoever you want.
No, that's true. And in Azure AD, there are things, there are roles. So groups can be members of roles. And that way, by being added to, say, the Tier 3 approvers group, that translates to a role in your app. And then that role is what dictates what you can and can't do, right?
Yeah. Nice. I'm going to jump into chat.js because this is the evolution of the SignalR Hello World, effectively. So you'll probably see some stuff in here if I can try and point it out.
Hey, I love how you kept the original name.
I literally thought
just go with
break this out, and I'm like,
put the code in.
Yeah, I was like, you know what? I don't care. It's just go, just get it in.
I mean, the fact that you developed this in 3 days is absolutely impressive, right? There's a lot of code there for 3 days, to be honest.
You can get a lot done when you go on D&D on Teams. I've noticed.
or when Teams goes into D&D on its own, like it has this morning for me.
Yes, exactly. Another thing I found when I was doing this is Git and version control is, if you know it, and I've learned it as part of my job, it's fantastic when you make mistakes. So I literally was like, do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to try this. I'm going to take out .chat.js. I'm just going to try throwing my model directly into JavaScript itself and not put any global variables like I showed you at the top there. And it worked so badly, I thought, right, can I just git stash? Drop the stash? And yeah, that sounds good. Or I'll check out --dot to just get rid of all my changes. That's quite a good one. Yeah. So here we go. We've got some SignalR basics in there where we get the connection with the hub builder with Chat Hub. I was quite fascinated that you could call that. Look,
dude.
The voting app is called Chat Hub. This is it. So I'm like, why change the name? It's chatting, it's voting, it's fine. We are going to disable the send button straight away, which is actually part of the SignalR Open Hello World as well, same as this line as well. And then I cheated a bit, as you can probably tell, where username clean is, I'm now assuming that everyone has an email address and there's an @ in their name. So I'm going to grab the first character up to that @ sign. So if I'm simon.crouch@feelinesoft.com, I'm going to be simon.crouch at this point. My template, I'm going to grab some elements on the page. So my chat log, my message template, that kind of thing. This was an interesting one. It took me, I had to talk to a colleague when they were working at this point where we said, right, how, that chat box on the right-hand side, it looks really nice, but how on earth do we replay the exact same content in CSS? Because if you look in the SignalR Hello World, it's just a list. It'll say, add another UI element of my message. And I don't need just one UI element. I need a whole load of stuff. And so what we do is we take that template, which is the message template that my colleague created, clone it over here to a new message, and then we can update it with my username, with my content, and things like that. So that's a little bit of JavaScript learning that we had to do. Yeah, JavaScript magic.
Magic, yes.
Which is quite nice. And then if we are the logged in person, then we're going to add a certain thing to style it to say that we look like, do you remember how I said the chat would be on the right-hand side for me and the left for somebody else? Kind of like you would be on your smartphone. So that's quite nice. Where we append the child. So that's all my chat stuff there. I had an amazing little bug come out at about midnight where I think it was about 8 a.m. when we started work or something the next morning, where we had like an hour or so. And it was just a nightmare where my colleague, I kid you not, clicked the left-hand side and clicked review 2, and my one over here changed its votes. And I was like, oh my goodness, what am I doing? And the SignalR Hub was basically redistributing to all clients, even if you're not looking at it. Does that make sense? It's going to take whatever my colleague says, grab the votes of that one, then just say, all clients, please, just update everyone's votes to whatever this person is now clicking. And I was like, oh my goodness, that's the most horrific bug I've ever seen in my life. So that simple line of, if my review ID is the current one I'm looking at, then that's really, really important. Otherwise, it will just keep on updating everybody's views, everybody's votes, no matter what you're doing. I'm going to grab some details and update those from SignalR. Thank you, SignalR. Another little thing that shocked me is how simple and amazing SignalR was as part of this, where you just pass through some objects and it just kind of takes care of the rest. And
it's amazing. It's amazing how much magic goes behind it, right? It's not like any technology that works so well is indistinguishable from magic.
I was debugging this and I didn't have just my code on, and it dived into the SignalR JS. I was like, oh my goodness.
No.
Like a gigantic jungle of obviously well-working code, but you don't want to go in there and edit something, I tell you.
Some very clever people work in that team. Shout out to my friend Brady Gaster, who manages both the SignalR client and the SignalR service on Azure, and the rest of the .NET team that are working on that. It's brilliant. And I think Anthony too has worked on the bindings with functions. So
yes,
all that works out of the box without you having to write a single line of code, which is insane.
If I can pause, one of the first things I saw was, I think it's build last year, where Anthony Chu is now on the Azure Functions team, but he wasn't for a long time.
Correct.
And he actually gave a demo, and I could only hear his voice, and it was one of these where I could see the presentation, where he took Azure Functions, combined it with SignalR, but then combined it with vocal input, which would then take his voice, punch it up to cognitive services.
Yeah,
that's it. Bring it down, then translate it into another language. And I was like, that is insane. Absolutely insane. How can you not get excited about that? I think that's awesome.
And he was doing multiple languages with one call, right? So you could say, I want to listen in Spanish, and then JP might say, I want to listen in Portuguese. Then it will translate to you based on your choice. So one incoming voice segment, and then it would come out to multiple based on your user choice. It's absolutely fantastic, and minimal amount of code. I don't think it was more than 100 lines of code there.
Absolutely. When my colleague asked for this kind of thing in real time, the first thing I went to is, actually, there's a SignalR service that Azure now provide. You can hook up to Azure Functions. It turned out to be overkill, and I didn't realize how well SignalR has now been integrated into .NET Core. So you can just add SignalR, and all of the DLLs and all the libraries are already there for you, which is amazing. So there's no NuGets that you need to bring in, or very, very minimal stuff. So I love that. To be able to set it up in just an hour or two, and then know how it works was just incredible. I think that was one of the best bits of this bit. We are going to update. When we load the screen on start, we're actually going to invoke our update current votes. That's the bit that then updates my votes. That's why I didn't have it in my my code behind my index or my voting CSHTML.cs, because it does it here in the SignalR for JavaScript, which is great.
Right.
And also pass up the actual ID that we need. Otherwise, how does it know what the votes to update? If I pause and just jump over to update current votes, you can see it over here in the chat hub, and it's literally reusing this get current grant status, which if I can Alt F12, you can see we've pretty much seen it before. It's just going to do that whole get votes thing, and this is pretty reused code. I think I've got lots of references of this one, where it basically goes to get my current votes has a look at my response, then reads it and puts it into a grant object, which looks like that with all my details in, remember? So there's all my current votes, and there's that grant that we have for there. And now we can actually update my count very easily with approve account, reject account. And these ones where I get my vote names, my vote names are going to the grant, where we are going to populate the first name of each person that votes. So when a vote goes through, what it does is it records the ID of the vote we're going through, what we've voted, but also our email. And I thought the more information, the better. That's why you see this split the name where we've got Simon.Crouch and we're just going to take the first name. So again, I'm cheating a little bit where I'm assuming it's all an email address with an @ and the first name dot surname is the format. And then we can send async update count for all of our clients, anyone that's included, with all of those things, with grant ID, with all our different objects. I paused and went, how many objects can I have for my overloads? And if you keep going, there's actually quite a few. There's 10 you can pass through. I found that quite.
Well, so, and when
I like how you tried to test and see how far you can go.
Yeah, I was like, do I need any more than 10? I was like, no, don't be so silly.
Well, so now,
right,
when you're updating that grant, because the grant itself is a durable entity, the fact that I might vote and Christos might vote and we might vote at the most, down to millisecond precision at the same time, both of our votes will be counted.
Yes, exactly that. Let's have a look at vote approve. So we've seen a lot of we're still on that. So now we've loaded the page. We don't need any more of that code behind. We've kind of loaded the page and everything takes over from JavaScript and SignalR. Not too much JavaScript, I should add. It's actually just what you see here. It's all in chat.js. Oops. Yeah.
That's never going to not be funny. I mean, when we have online voting in the United States, I guarantee you it'll be run by chat.js.
Oh my goodness. Like we were saying just in moments before the stream, over here in the UK, hopefully most of you have heard the hilarious news that our government, and I should say as an English person, we're all like this over here going, oh my goodness, the Patrick Stewart meme of facepalm, we're all doing this, where our government have filled up their Excel sheet too much and therefore they couldn't write 1 million or so rows to it. And so a lot of people that needed to be told about the place they've been has now got a positive case of COVID-19. They didn't get that, and so they're now working through the backlog. Oh my goodness! All of us, including the non-IT folks, are like, oh my goodness.
Should have used 64-bit Office. Then you get what, like 2 billion rows or something?
Yeah, exactly. Or
not Excel, but I don't know. Well, you said you were a consultant, right?
Yeah, I don't use Excel. I mean, I love Excel, and I grew up with Excel. This is how I first learned coding with Excel, in fact. From if statements to VBA. Absolutely. Yeah. I used to analyze my bank statements in VBA. Don't ask me why. It was just...
Nice. That's awesome.
Why not?
Back in the day. Yeah, before we had all these apps that do that kind of stuff for you, I would run through Excel sheets and VBA and work out which category was which by defining it on another tab.
Well,
it's one of the first programs I've ever run.
I mean, do you remember, what was it, Microsoft Money, like the app, right?
Yeah.
Well, now...
It's back.
Now it's back, and it's like an Excel app. It's called Money in Excel.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
It's full circle. I mean, if you can't do it in Excel, it's like conversations. If you can't say it in a GIF, it's not worth saying. If you can't do it in Excel, it's not worth programming, right?
Hey, I know you're laughing, but my team, when I was in the UK, when we're hiring for ADMs and PFEs, which is like application delivery manager or application development managers and premier field engineers, we would ask people how would they come up with a solution to a problem. And we hired people that said Excel. So we would give them a very complex problem. And some people were like, oh, I'm going to use Azure, and I'm going to use these services. I'm going to write in .NET. And then there were just a couple of people like, I'll just use Excel, man. And it was like the simplest solution. But you can go to a customer, walk in and say, you can solve this problem with Excel. Obviously, not every problem can be solved with Excel. But if you can provide them with a simple solution, which is something that we're looking for, then you win.
Absolutely.
So Excel was our hiring criteria. So if you can answer Excel to our questions, you're hired.
Yeah, I mean...
Sorry, I ruined the PFE team now in the UK. Sorry, guys.
You guys want to take a quick break? Quick break?
Yeah.
Quick break. All right, let's take a 5-minute break. We'll be back at 5:55 after the hour, maybe a few minutes before.
That's good.
We'll be back in just a few minutes. Stick with us. See you in a minute.
Okay.
All right, we're back. Back a few minutes early.
You know what? You didn't ask me if I was ready, Dave. I think you're losing your touch, JP.
Today I was not ready. That's why we started
Yeah,
25
you were
minutes
not
later. Okay.
It's fine.
All right. Let me show you something that I came across. Do you remember how we were talking before about durable entities and the speed of which they write in terms of signaling?
Yep.
Well, this is what I thought. The code originally wrote was here. I was before we vote approve. Let us essentially call the function and then to vote. Does that make sense like that? And the other one is get the function state, can't type, and then return kind of thing. So it makes sense, and that's exactly the same kind of thing you do in a database. So you're going to write something to the database. Now the database has been updated. Go get the actual state of the database, then return to the page. But the problem was that it wasn't writing fast enough for my return, and it took debugging to work out what was going on. So I thought, all right, I'm running out of time now. How do I make this work, which isn't too horrible, is acceptable to me, but also gets me over the line? And the answer was separate the concerns of SignalR and signaling the durable entity. I was like, okay, how would I want this to work? I'm like, no matter what, I want to be able to send up my vote first, because I can signal, which means it's a one-way direction. I can't read it immediately. You can in a durable you can with a durable function or an orchestrator function, same thing, but not with a client or just basic Azure function. So I thought what I'll do is I will post my new vote here. So here's my URL. Then in my URL, I'm going to post my new vote with my ID and who I am, which is my email address. Do you remember my username isn't here? Do you remember where we got that from? That was from the actual page of voting.cs at the bottom with my, sorry, I apologize, my CSHTML. There we go. So my logged in user, if I go back to my chat.cs, is actually this one over here. So that's why I'm using my logged in user. But my call vote, which I need to grab around, apologies. Update function. I'm just going to go back. There we go. Excellent. Yeah, so I've got my grant ID. I've got my username, which is from my, my context, my identity on the actual Chat Hub CS. So this is on my web app in my Chat Hub CS code. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to signal that entity and save it, but then I'm going to update the clients. I'm going to cheat. I'm actually going to add on my approved vote here separately to my durable entity. So here I am signaling my other clients from my Chat Hub, but I'm pretending I'm going my Chat Hub approved count ++, do this first, and then send that signal to everybody else. So I don't need to read back that state. That line there means signal my entity, but don't worry about what its state is going to be, because I'm only doing one thing, which I already know is going to be incrementing that approved count. So let's just cheat and just do that here in my signal. So I get this instant feedback where it just throws up the signal, and then this fantastic instant feedback across all of my clients where SignalR just takes care of it for me. And it works really, really well. Same as my vote reject. It's a very, very similar pattern where I've got my ++ reject count down here. And then if I explore my code as well, we've got other stuff is going on very, very similarly. Let me have a look. Yeah, so my update current votes is pretty standard, where we pull all the details and then just punch that out all the way through. But my vote of remove and vote reject, this has got this ++ in it, so that we can just do the SignalR signaling and do the separate signal to that durable entity. Okay. In terms of the last bits of the page, let's have a little look. So on my voting page, so let's remind ourselves of what it looks like. So here I've got my anonymized vote, which is just it's a cheat. It's just a JavaScript call to hide unapprove these names. This we would put some identity behind and make sure that only certain people could do the anonymized function, so that it could be like an admin that controls the session.
Yeah.
And then they could tick the box and just leave it on. And then my finalized application, which is the approve application, is just a call to that API endpoint. But I thought the way of doing it is, rather than going too crazy with SignalR, because I don't need to update anyone, it's just updating CRM or Microsoft Dynamics at this point, is I can now go to my post on post async, where here we are, we've got approve or reject string, where if it's going to be we're going to bind this to an object, an overall application vote request, where it should be a Boolean field, because I thought, look, it's either going to be approve or it's not approve. So we're going to take that string, true or false it, to get our approve Boolean out over here.
The review ID, there's no maybe.
No. Another quick side story, something I learned from my Excel days is where I asked a colleague to fill in an Excel sheet, and I put some drop downs in. And they used to, before I did this whole locking down an Excel sheet and just asked them to type in whatever they wanted, they'd type something crazy. So I thought, why don't we just learn how to lock down certain cells and put in a drop down so they can only select yes or no? I sent it off to my colleague. Within 30 seconds, she opened it, walked over to my desk and said, there's no option to put maybe. I was like, yes, that's the entire point. So system works.
There's a whole section on the web called the tri-state Boolean. So let's not go down there.
Do you also love it when somebody puts a nullable Boolean field or nullable bit field in a database, and you're like, oh my goodness, forever on, you've got to write if null or false kind of thing. Question mark, false. Another tiny quick story is I learned my lesson very quickly when I made another form for colleagues to fill in, where they would just paste something in Excel, and it would do all the work for them to do a certain thing. That, by the way, everyone, is at my end of day toggle telling me to log my time. So let's just close that out.
Nice.
So that's a Windows task schedule kicking off, by the way, to open my tabs, which is quite cool. So I never forget to log my time.
Nice.
Yeah. So another end of my quick story is that when I gave my colleagues this Excel sheet, I locked down every single cell, every single one apart from one above where they need to paste, because I thought, no way in hell are they going to click that. I've even selected yellow where they need to paste. And what's the first thing my colleague did? The first thing is paste where I didn't want them to paste.
Users are unpredictable. They will do all the things that you don't expect them to do. So that's a great lesson for developers out there. Like, just because you didn't think about it doesn't mean that the users won't try it.
Absolutely. If you lock down 99% of a thing, they will find the 1%. I absolutely guarantee it.
Yes.
You know, even on their first go, which was wonderful.
Fun times.
So at this point, we're voting an overall reject or approve or reject at this point. So we've got my request has been built up by this point. And this way, what I wanted to do was create another endpoint from my Azure Functions, which is the vote overall application.
Right.
Again, we're just going to blow up if we don't have any joy with that, which is actually quite a good thing to put into code when I was developing it, because my colleague changed something on their end and I couldn't work out what's going on, but it was blowing up, so that was quite nice. And then saved is just a prop to my model, which I'm going to put through into the CSHTML. And then we're going to refresh the client applications with the session ID. Let's have a look, which is going to go through and refresh all the details on that page in case anything has changed.
Mm-hmm.
And then the vote overall application, if I Control T and jump over, Control T is fantastic. Jump through, and this one is just essentially takes that bit field, which I'd voted approve or reject on, transfers it into a Microsoft Dynamics defined ID, which my colleagues told me what it was. It doesn't help it when they tell you it wrong and they say it's that one or that one. I'm like, yeah, dude, you got to get me the other value as well. That's all kind of fun. Now we're going to mock the data and just cheat for now, but essentially this is what it would do: is go off to that API endpoint we talked about, and then just do an HTTP client dot put async, because it was part of the Swagger that I need to put call there, and then return OK or return an error message with couldn't update.
So how are you authenticating to that proxy API that they created for you, or are you at all?
I wasn't. That's the tricky thing. That's why I took that out of the code before I released it to open source, because I thought that is the one that people will have fun with.
Yeah.
Into our demo system. It's not like a live system or anything, but we do use it for demoing.
Yeah.
But that is another thing. So what can I ask? What would you two do in terms of locking that down in CRM? If you've got a self-created API JSON endpoint that you only wanted, say, logged in AD people to use, what kind of authentication would you use? Like bearer token, or what would you do?
I think that'd be the place to start. So your API, the proxy API, would, since it's talking to Dynamics, it's going to have permissions in Dynamics, but it would also need to expose a couple scopes. So like one of the scopes could be voting, voting.read or voting.read write, and another scope could be like applications.write. So like that would give you permission to say approve or reject the whole thing. And those scopes are, you would register an application in Azure AD. And then, so that would be your API. Your front end app would be a separate application, and it would request those scopes, right? So that means that in the front end, when a user signs in, they would both sign in, but then they'd also, you as a developer, you would request a token. So you'd request an access token for the API with a specific set of scopes. So, the ability to read, the ability to write. Once that gets issued by Azure AD, you send that in the bearer header, in the authorization header, and then your API would have to be the thing that says, oh, okay, let me look at this, make sure the token is correct, make sure it's valid, and then make sure that the token has the correct scopes in it to allow this behavior to happen. EasyAuth can do that too. So if you hosted it in App Service or in Functions, EasyAuth would handle validating that token for you. And all you'd have to do is check the data in the token to make sure it gives the requisite permission. So, can this user, or can this vote happen, or, that sort of thing.
Nice. That sounds
for those scenarios where your API, like the CRM API, lives somewhere inside your on-prem, you could use API management, for example, to stick a layer of proxying in front of that. So if you cannot implement, say, authentication inside your CRM API layer, then you can use API management to do that for you. Again, that's somewhere where you can stick Azure AD and protect the API behind the scenes. So you don't always have to change code. You don't have to implement that. There are tools and options for you to configure them in a clever way.
Nice. Yeah, that's good. I watched a video when I was walking to work, which is when I generally used to watch my Microsoft videos, and I just came in raving about, do you hear about API management? And again, some people have heard of it, some people haven't. And honestly, the people, I worked with another colleague who was using API management, and we didn't realize how good it was, I think is the correct way to put it. We weren't using it in the right way. And when we changed our code to take away our own authentication and actually start using parts of the system, it just became so much easier to just give out temporary API tokens to developers that wanted it, and things like that. I think that's great, because otherwise you're in the database hacking around trying to put writing in expiry dates yourself or hard removing stuff out, and it just seems laborious when you could just get Microsoft to do that for you as part of the service. I think it's great.
Exactly.
So that's probably where we would start. And then API management just got some new integration with Azure AD too, so that not only can you pass a token through, but you can also use APIM can actually go talk to an Azure AD protected service now natively without having to use like certificate or basic, which was you had used before. So that's pretty cool too.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Exactamente.
Well, I think that is pretty much it. There's a whistle-stop tour of this crazy coding fest. I don't think I'd recommend coding for 3 days straight, if I'm quite honest with you. Especially to a deadline where you're going to hand it to the client to play with for an hour. I mean, like the second I heard those words at 11 o'clock at night, I thought... Yeah,
that's...
And it was... We were chatting on Teams, and it came down to, well, you either make it work now, or you make it work in the morning, and it's your choice. And... I've got 2 young kids, and they get me up at 6 a.m. and that's it. You've got no chance to work before 9 o'clock, and when they're all packed off and ready to go to nursery or school or whatever.
I think my young
so I just stayed up.
I think my young kids just got home from school. If you can hear that. So. and then you've released all this code, right? So this is all out.
I have, absolutely.
This is in real-time collaborative voting. Is that the
that's
repo?
It.
Cool. We'll put a link out to it.
So it should be over here. I've got it up here. So it's this is my GitHub. It's tabbed. It's linked in the top left in the pinned tab. So go to github.com/Mr. Simon C, and you can download it with it, play with it, and just laugh at the general appallingness of throwing it all together. But but in terms of like, I'm really proud of what came out of it, if that makes sense at the end of it.
Yeah.
A couple of the things that saved me was having authentication as just part of a hello world in Razor Pages was great. Christos, your blog absolutely saved me when I came to get those calendar invites and those calendar entries. That was great. But one of my favorite ever features, which hopefully I can double click and show you, is I always add nullable enable, because it just stops those really annoying null reference explosions at runtime that you just can't predict in design time.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I actually found that the things I thought would be difficult were easy. The things I thought would be easy were difficult. So trying to pull my colleagues' API stuff was blowing up because I'd put nullable enable on here because they said, this is not going to be null, it'll be fine. And of course it was null. So yeah, so well done for the code, but quite makes it quite hard when you're trying to do this at speed.
Yeah.
Whereas SignalR, well, this is it. SignalR was really, really easy to get going, way easier than I thought. That really helped me, the whole chat app, and the fact that you've got different styles of tutorial for different methods, like Razor Web Pages is one, MVC is another, and this kind of thing, or different languages, TypeScript or JavaScript. You've got those options. So I actually tried out a few. I was going through my files for this presentation and found that I did 3 different trials of getting stuff working, and then I literally, because of your blog, chose the one. I was like, oh, I already did this one, so I'm just going to stick with Razor.
That's awesome.
That gets me along.
Perfect.
And then finally, one tiny thing is the durable functions was such a star. Sorry, durable entities was such a star where I was developing this, going through, and found that, oh my goodness, I need another property. Do you remember how I said I kind of hijacked the grant by adding in this have I started little property? Yep. I added this halfway through when I'd finished all of this, and I went, oh my goodness, I should do that start or join session. I'll do that at the very, very end because it's a nice to have rather than a requirement. And I just threw it in, and it just didn't care. It was like, yep, it's fine. I've already got some stuff.
Yeah.
I don't care. Just throw it at me.
No, that is awesome because database schema updates and changes always cause a billion problems if without nullable. Yeah, that's awesome.
And it's great. So. Yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. I think, I loved it. I'm just exhausted talking about the whole thing.
It's a lot of work. That's why.
Well, it's a lot of work.
Well, thanks for coming and telling us all about it. I mean, it was really cool, just especially sort of understand your thought process behind it. Because I mean, I think anybody who's had to produce software, especially under deadline, especially for people to use, I think we all sort of understand that there are all types of concessions and things that we have to make, and prioritization becomes most important. It's been really interesting hearing, where and why you had to do the things you had to do. I just think it's really cool to share that with people. So,
well, thank you very much for having me on. I think, it's been great, and I love the stuff that you guys at Microsoft are doing. And like I say to all my colleagues, if we don't embrace the tools that you guys are spending time creating, then we're just doing ourselves a disservice, and it just makes our lives harder.
No, that's true.
So,
yep, a lot of engineers.
You're doing our job for us. Thank you so much, Simon. It was great having you. Thank you for taking time off your late afternoon to speak to us. And feel free to come back to the show anytime you want.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Next time I spend nights coding till 1 a.m. in the morning, I'll give you a shout.
Let's just do it live on the show. You don't have to code alone. How about that?
Well, thank you. Thanks, Simon. Really appreciate it. And I think everybody else, hey, we are going to be back on Thursday with Sahil Malik, who is on our team here in Identity. He's going to give us sort of a lap around tokens, the Azure CLI, Azure AD, and all sorts of neat stuff around that. And Sahil's one of my favorite people, so I'm excited that he's going to be here. And so we'll be back Thursday, and then we're also going to have a special Friday show this week, which is going to be interesting. But we'll have more details on that on Thursday.
Yeah, there will be more details about that, but we are looking at our schedule, so there might be some announcements coming on this Thursday.
Yep.
So stick around.
Yeah.
And I'll leave you with this beautiful man's face who helped me out on the blog.
Thank you, sir.
So
you're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, so I was going to find somebody for us to go and raid, but it looks like everybody's offline just Tuesday morning.
C# Fritz seems to be online.
Oh, is he online? Well, let's go over. Let's go see what Mr. Fritz is up to today. As always, if you if you need any help, feel free to reach out to us on Twitter. Send us an email, the ID dev soc at service.microsoft.com. Feel free to reach out to us. Let us know what you need, and we will see you all on Thursday. And we're going to go see what Mr. Fritz is doing. See you later, everybody. Have a good rest of your day.
Everybody.
Bye.
Okay, bye.